I sat at my desk, monotonous sounds emanating from the flickering fluorescent lights above. The hum of machinery filled the air, blending with the rhythmic tapping of fingers on keyboards. My job as a technician at the municipal transit office was typically uneventful, a routine of checks and minor repairs. The city's public announcement system was my primary responsibility, ensuring messages reached commuters effectively. At the far end of the office, the man periodically glanced over his screen, always deep in concentration. I appreciated his dedication. He had a way of making even routine tasks seem engrossing. I turned back to my own computer, my mind wandering occasionally to thoughts of the upcoming weekend. After a long day spent rebuilding a faulty microphone, I returned to the control room. The room was lined with monitors displaying feeds from different transit stations. I ran a standard diagnostic on the public announcement system. As I navigated the software, an unexpected sound caught my attention through the speakers. Murmurs interspersed with the typical noise of static. I adjusted the knobs, trying to isolate the source, but it was transient and fleeting, slipping away as quickly as it came. I shrugged it off as a quirk of the equipment. Times like this, when I was in the control room alone, I liked to imagine it was some form of radio interference. Yet, something in the tone of those voices lingered. It was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Perhaps a figment of my weary brain? I finished my checks, documenting the strange snippet and getting ready to head home. The next morning, I returned bright and early. I had forgotten about the murmurs until I pressed play on a recording of the previous day's output. Static crackled and filled the room. Then, there it was again, the faint echo of voices. I leaned closer to the speakers, feeling a mix of excitement and unease. They were clearer this time, as if they were attempting to communicate from beyond the static. I picked up the headset, rewinding the audio, replaying the segment repeatedly. The more I listened, the more distinct the voices became, a blend of words, overlapping and intertwining in a way that felt almost purposeful. I paused the recording, my heart racing. I reached for the notepad beside me, scribbling down snippets of phrases I thought I heard. I began to share my findings with my colleagues. The woman who worked in scheduling had little interest, dismissing it as mere background noise. "Just the system having a moment," she said, returning to her spreadsheets. But the other technician raised an eyebrow. "Have you tried tracking it?" he asked, deep in thought. I hadn't. The possibility intrigued me. I decided to try capturing whatever this anomaly was. I spent hours reworking the data, analyzing the recordings for patterns. To my annoyance, more calls from commuters filled my day. They had mundane inquiries about route changes or schedule discrepancies, but I tried to keep my focus sharp, my mind weaving through the chatter while I kept one ear on the recordings. After a few days of this strange pursuit, I decided to investigate further. I returned to the control room alone after hours, feeling both nervous and thrilled. The room felt strangely different in the quiet. It was as if it echoed with secrets. I played the recordings again, adjusting the levels to emphasize the voices. They came like waves, crashing against a silent shoreline. As I increased the volume, the voices began to surface, almost urgent. Words became clearer, and I recognized a few phrases, names I had heard whispered on the street or in passing conversations. The feeling of déjà vu washed over me, leaving me unsettled. I recorded my findings, determined to share them. But each time I presented them, the responses were lukewarm. My colleagues joked, telling me to get some rest, that the system was just acting up. As the comments stung, I felt an odd isolation. Each passing day wore me down, a feeling that suffocated my sense of reality. Weeks of this strange fixation passed before anything shifted. One evening, while playing the recordings again, I noticed a distinct pattern forming. It was more than just unconnected voices. They were revealing a story. The more I listened, the more it felt like someone was trying to convey something important. I could almost piece together a tale, a narrative of loss, fragmented memories layered upon one another. Yet still, the voices were muddled, a scramble of past lives weaving through present time. I felt compelled to unravel the thread, each detail pulling me deeper into this web of sound. But the obsession took its toll. I began staying late, skipping meals as I focused on the recordings. I wasn't the only one who noticed. The man closest to me in the office hinted that I should take a break. I dismissed him, insisting I was fine. But the weight of my fixation was palpable. It was around that time that I overheard the voices shift, speaking with a sense of urgency, growing louder. I watched the records of audio feedback light up, fluctuating unexpectedly. There was something rhythmic about the chaos. As I played and replayed the segments, an eerie feeling settled around me, a sensation akin to hands brushing past my skin, or whispers suggestively beckoning me to listen. Determined to make sense of it all, I pushed through the noise, charting the strands in my mind, like a spider weaving its web. I began to notice a disturbing pattern. Each time I uncovered a new piece, I'd glimpse the same names being repeated, desperate and racked with sorrow. It was different now, almost personal. Now accustomed to the presence of the voices, I chose one of the unknown names and began searching for connections outside the recordings. I probed through data archives, diving into accident reports and old news articles. What I uncovered left me with an unsettling feeling in my chest. It turned out the name belonged to a victim of a long-forgotten tragedy, someone who had been lost in one of the city's most infamous incidents. I had created a bridge between worlds the moment I recognized it, crossing over to something much darker than I had anticipated. Returning to the recordings, I trembled as the weight of loss hung in the air. The voices now felt like lost souls, drifting through the void, seeking acknowledgement. Each time I replayed the audio, the same chilling emotions reverberated, sorrow mixed with an unshakable urge to be remembered. The concern of my colleagues grew as I spent more nights in the control room, the pale light casting dark shadows around me. They urged me to break away, warning me against what they perceived as madness. I tried to explain, revealing the connections I had unearthed, but they couldn't see what I saw. And then I had the first real breakthrough. A voice reached out to me clearly. It uttered my name, a chilling echo of my identity reverberating through the speakers. I was frozen, heart pounding as I stared at the screen. It had taken everything I had. The line between past and present blurred permanently. My colleagues were skeptical, but I was euphoric. I drew closer to finalizing the recordings, creating a compilation, a testament to those forgotten souls, even though a growing dread gripped me. The next morning, I brought the recordings to the conference room, anxious, yet resolute. As I played the audio, the room fell silent, each person absorbing the whispers. Just as excitement bubbled within me, however, I noticed something unsettling. The voices began to shift, They transformed from harmonious lament into disarray, overlapping in frantic desperation. I glanced at the other technician, confusion reflected in his eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that events had spiraled beyond my control. The voices intensified, warning notes reverberating through the clamoring chaos. My heart raced as I leant closer to the speaker, struggling against the panic rising in my throat. And then, all at once, clarity slipped. The room darkened around me, the voices echoing louder still, whispering secrets I could barely comprehend. I staggered back, pulling the headphones from my ears as it crescendoed, overwhelming reality. By the time I left the conference room, I felt untethered, my thoughts colliding in chaotic bursts. It was difficult for me to focus, my grip on sanity fraying like rotting thread. For days, I tried to piece together what had happened, the phenomenon lingering with me like a stain that would not wash away. As I returned to my desk, the walls felt like they were closing in. I opened the software, seeking to find solace in data, but the static warped, carrying voices that recognized me, not as a technician, but as a part of their losses. I jumped when the speaker blared, my pulse racing in my ears. I scanned through the names once more, horrified to find more similarities, a web of tragedy stretching far beyond what I had expected. A knot formed in my throat as I realized how interconnected they all were, how forgotten stories intertwined. They were echoing through the ether, demanding to be heard, desperately clawing at my thoughts. The next evening, I returned to work, burdened with the weight of their stories, each voice whispering insistently. I wanted to turn back, to find escape in the mundane, but the compulsion was magnetic. I approached the microphone, its emptiness yawning before me, as if it knew the truth I had yet to confront. And then I heard it, an unfamiliar voice surfacing, resonating clear through the chatter, beckoning me to understand. The faint specter of familiarity tugged at my consciousness once more, the recognition squeezing at the edges of my mind. I gripped the edges of my desk as another voice joined, and then another. If I had believed the phenomenon was an anomaly before, it had shifted into something so incomprehensible I could hardly breathe. There, caught within the tangled fabric of voices, I realized they shared something vital. My own story entwined with theirs, each call stretching through the years. I feel my past rise before me, a chorus growing louder, my reality crashing against the fragile barriers I had built. As chaos surged and names rang apparent, the realization hit me like a tidal wave crashing to shore. I was trapped within their echoes, a forgotten piece of the living, desperate for a resolution that would never come. My heart pounded with a heavy finality. I knew I had not only listened for too long, but had unwittingly woven myself into their unfolding narrative. The cacophony of voices enveloped me, beckoning, urging, and I stood suspended, feeling the inexorable pull of the past, unable to leave, as the whispers clamored for permanence. The last thing I understood was that the echo would never fade, and the truth would remain forever elusive.